In April of 1928, the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus took over the new Madison Square Garden. Crowds flocked to see Habu lift 100-pound weights using only his tongue, and John L. Sullivan, the boxing elephant. But something even more unusual was taking place at the same time. The New York Rangers had made it to the Stanley Cup Final in just their second year. The circus took precedence and exiled the Rangers from their own home. Therefore, the entire best-of-5 series would have to be played at the Montreal Forum, home of their opponents, the Maroons. There was some talk about shifting the Rangers' home games to Detroit, but all involved agreed it was better to just shelter in place for the duration of the series. The Maroons had won the Stanley Cup just 2 years earlier, in 1926. The NHL approved the creation of a second team in New York to go along with the Americans a month later. That team would become original owner Tex Rickard's Rangers. The Maroons' opponent in 1926 were the Victoria Cougars of the original Western Hockey League, which was folding at the conclusion of the series. The Cougars had beaten the Montreal Canadiens in the Stanley Cup Final the year before that. The Canadiens won it the year before that. Lester Patrick had been a major on-ice contributor to those Cougars teams. When the league folded and his Cougars lost the final, he retired as a player at age 42 and moved to New York to coach Texas Rangers. In some ways, a final showdown between a Lester Patrick team and a Montreal team seemed inevitable, though improbable. He couldn't have known that his playing days weren't actually over, though. In 1924-25, the NHL added its first American team in Boston. The following season, they would add the Americans and Pittsburgh Pirates. The Rangers, Chicago, and Detroit would follow the year after that. The league suddenly had more American teams than Canadian ones, and split the league into American and Canadian divisions. The playoffs would feature 3 quick rounds. The first 2 would feature 2-game total goals series. The Stanley Cup Final would be decided by a best-of-5 showdown, no longer between East and West, but now between North and South. The Rangers skated past the Pittsburgh Pirates and Boston Bruins on their way to the final. The Maroons made it by the Ottawa Senators and crosstown rivals, the Canadiens. In doing so, the Maroons had secured the now-forgotten and once-lost George Kennedy Memorial Trophy, emblematic of city champions between the two clubs. After the deciding game, Howie Morenz and Herb Gardner of the Canadiens congratulated the Maroons in their locker room. Nobody thought much of the Rangers' prospects in the final. To accommodate the massive overflow crowds, the Montreal Star set up loudspeakers in front of the Morgan store on St. Catherine Street and broadcast their own play-by-play. The report could be heard throughout the area of Phillips Square. Crowds of 10 to 25,000 filled the square and lined the surrounding streets. They cheered along to the broadcast and a 2-0 Maroons victory in Game 1. The game was not nearly as exciting inside the building. The Forum missed the boisterous energy of the Habs crowd. A stifling Maroons defense took care of the rest. The Rangers struggled to enter the zone all night and got no high-danger shots towards Clint Benedict. In the final 2 frames, Maroons defenders prevented the Rangers from enjoying any sustained offensive zone time at all. Game 2 is the one everyone remembers. It was another tight-checking defensive battle. Both teams kept the other's shots to the perimeter. Early in the second of the scoreless draw, Maroons defender Dunk Monroe sent an offhand feed to Nels Stewart as the two broke away behind the Blue Shirts' defensive line. Stewart sent a hard backhand shot on goal. The puck hit Rangers goaler Lorne Chabot square in the left eye. As Chabot was being attended to and helped off the ice, the officials sent both teams to their locker rooms. Chabot's eye was completely swollen shut. When it became clear that he couldn't continue, Lester Patrick and Maroons manager Eddie Girard held a conference with league officials. Already down a game in the series, Patrick was desperate. Senators goalie Alex Connell was in the stands. Many considered Connell the best in the game. Patrick wanted to use him on an emergency basis. Girard said, "Suckers were born yesterday, Lester." Minor leaguer Huey McCormick was also in the stands. Even he would be an adequate replacement. Gerard said, "You're talking to the wrong man." Several years earlier, Patrick himself had allowed the Leafs to use an emergency sub for an injured goalie. It was Eddie Gerard himself. "Sorry," Gerard said, "I can't hear you." League officials agreed with Gerard. The replacement goalie would have to come from the Rangers' ranks. In the Rangers' locker room, he looked for a volunteer. None came forward. Patrick then gave a nod to Rangers trainer Harry Westerby and said, "Harry, I'm in goal." Rangers star Frank Boucher said, "Wait a minute." Patrick started strapping on Chabot's pads. "We'll get somebody else," Boucher continued. "Anybody." After a 20-minute delay, both teams tramped back out onto the ice. The 44-year-old Patrick took his spot between the pipes. A Hall of Fame defenseman during his playing days, Patrick had never played goal a day in his life. The Rangers defenders understood the assignment. They boxed out anyone who tried to get in close. Early defender Taffy Abel played the game of his life, roughing up the Maroons and limiting their shot attempts. It took 5 minutes for the Maroons to sneak a shot on goal. It was a weak one that skidded along the ice surface. Patrick stopped it easily. Maybe they had a shot after all. The Rangers escaped the second period still in a scoreless draw. Just seconds into the third, Bill Cook scored for the Rangers on the man advantage. About midway through, hot-handed Maroons rookie Russell Oatman flipped a changeup from the blue line, which nearly caught Patrick napping. It was a smart strategy to deploy against an inexperienced goalie. A Nels Stewart strike off a Hooley Smith rebound tied the score with less than 5 minutes remaining in the third. In overtime, Patrick faced hard shots from Smith and Stewart, stopping them with a pair of beauties. The Montreal press were won over by his, quote, "prodigious feats of netminding." The game ended off a Ching Johnson rush with a sloppy finish. Johnson passed to Frank Boucher in the slot. Boucher directed the puck into the net off Smith's skate. 2-1 Rangers final. After the game, it was revealed that Chabot had suffered a hemorrhage in his eye and would be unavailable for the remainder of the series. This time, the league had a plan. Member clubs only carried one goalie on the roster in those days, but the league had an emergency backup who could be used by any and all clubs who required it. That goalie was Joe Miller. He'd started the year as the Americans' regular goalie, but finished it with the Niagara Falls Cataracts of the Can Pro circuit. Those in the forum who knew who he was remembered him as a senior hockey star in Ottawa. Game 3 ended 2-0 in favor of the Maroons. If it weren't for Miller's netminding, however, the score would have been more lopsided. Those who saw him play that night said he was magnificent. He was even better in Game 4, a 1-0 Rangers victory. Once again, Johnson and Abel did their best to shelter the man between their pipes, and once again, their best was good enough. But here's something that's almost never mentioned when the Lester Patrick goaltending story comes up. Though the Maroons came out on top of Game 3, they didn't come out of it intact. A scrap between the Rangers' Paul Thompson and the Maroons' Joe Lamb resulted in both players being ejected. Each was suspended for the following game as well. It was clear that Lamb's absence imbalanced the Maroons' lineup, and they couldn't get much going offensively in Game 4. Hooley Smith played nearly the entire game without a substitution. There's no telling how the outcome changes if both teams ice a full lineup. However, in the game of hockey, there are no excuses, only results. Before the fifth and deciding game, a snowstorm blanketed the city with slush. Scalpers with wet cuffs hawked single tickets for $35 apiece, an astronomical sum. Once again, Phillips Square was packed to overflowing. On the ice, the Maroons carried the play, but the Rangers got the scores. A rising shot from Smith struck Miller in his right eye. Physicians attended him for what felt like an eternity. Miller's eye was nearly swollen shut. The Rangers bench sweated as Patrick prepared to lace them up yet again. But after 10 minutes, Miller returned and received a massive cheer from the otherwise hostile crowd. Johnson fought through leg, nose, and eye injuries of his own to turn aside Montreal attackers at nearly every turn. When one got through, Miller played brilliantly. Time and time again, he turned aside sure chances and frustrated the home team. Chabot stood on the sidelines wearing a black eye patch. He hadn't been released from hospital yet and had to return after the game, but he couldn't miss this one. The game was 1-0 Rangers in the third when Oatman put one over a sprawling Miller. The crowd, already in a frenzy, exploded in cheers. But when an offside call negated the score, the cheers darkened to something more visceral. The ice surface was littered with torn-up game programs, several hats, and even a chair. The game was delayed another 10 minutes for cleanup. Still up 1-0 with less than 5 minutes to go in the third, Boucher squirted through the Maroons' defensive wall, broke the ankles of the lone back-checker, then deked Benedict's pants off for the 2-0 score. Montreal got within 1 2 minutes later, but it wasn't enough. The Rangers became just the second American team to win the Stanley Cup after Seattle did it in 1917. They were the first American NHL team to win it, and they were the only visiting club to win a Stanley Cup at the Montreal Forum until Calgary did it in 1989. The victory solidified Patrick's net-minding feat into all-time hockey lore, but the real story was the brilliant performance of Miller and the Rangers' combination of stout defending and a balanced two-line attack. Miller was traded that offseason by the Americans to the Pirates for Hall of Famer Roy Werters and finished his NHL career with a paltry 24, 89, and 16 record on a pitiful team. No disrespect to Haboo with the iron tongue, but the circumstances of the Rangers' 1928 Stanley Cup win were crazier than any circus performance.
John Ross Roach was a goaltending prodigy. As a rookie, he helped the Toronto St. Pats win the Stanley Cup in 1922. Small and acrobatic, he quickly became one of the most spectacular puck stoppers in the game. Writers regularly ranked him among the best goaltenders in hockey. He was voted first-team All-Star in 1933. Yet, within 2 years, his career was over. And by the time the Hockey Hall of Fame opened in 1948, Roach was almost completely forgotten. What happened? It was no secret that John Ross Roach had a bit of a drinking problem. One night, while driving through Whitby, Ontario, he hit a parked car and was knocked unconscious for several hours. Contemporary newspaper reports didn't mention that he broke his jaw during the incident. This happened in late August 1932. After the accident, Roach experimented with baseball catcher's masks in practice and was even photographed wearing one. The rule book made provisions for a goalie to wear protective equipment special to the position, but Roach ultimately rejected the catcher's mask during games because the shadows cast by the cage under the artificial arena lighting interfered with his ability to track the puck. Roach was coming off a personal career low. The 1932 season had ended in humiliation. A blowout Stanley Cup final loss in which Roach allowed 6 goals in each of the 3 games. Rangers fans referred to it as the tennis series for that reason. The goals against weren't entirely on Roach, as the Rangers were thoroughly outplayed by the Toronto Maple Leafs. There are some who believe that 1932 Leafs team was the best in club history. Still, Rangers boss Lester Patrick was unhappy with Roach's performance. It was the second Stanley Cup final loss he had suffered as a member of the Rangers in 4 seasons. To this day, he remains the only Rangers goalie to lose in 2 different Stanley Cup finals. When he reported to camp that year with a tender jaw, Patrick had seen enough. He sold Roach's contract to Jack Adams and the newly renamed Detroit Red Wings. They had been called the Falcons the year before. That season, 1932-33, was one of Roach's best. Through consistent play, he outdueled Charlie Gardner, widely considered the game's best goaltender, and was voted first-team All-Star. He led the league in wins that year with a career-best 25. He placed third in a tight Hart Trophy race and finished with a goals-against average under 2 for the 4th time in his career. He remains one of only 10 goalies to do so. In the playoffs, the Wings breezed past the Montreal Maroons in 2 straight and found themselves in a semifinals showdown with the New York Rangers. The Rangers got the better of Roach with sneak plays that gave him no chance to make a save. The Rangers would go on to capture their second Stanley Cup victory with a smart, smothering style, conservative but opportunistic offense, and timely goaltending from Roach's aptly named replacement, Andy Aikenhead. The Rangers were simply the better team, but the perception lingered. The Rangers had decided they could not win with Roach. Then they beat him and won the Stanley Cup. The verdict, in the eyes of many, seemed confirmed. On December 10th, the following season, Roach, maskless, was cut across the upper lip by the skate blade of teammate Ebby Goodfellow in a net front melee. As he fell, Roach's head hit the ice and he was knocked cold. Those watching probably thought he'd been killed during rough play. The scrum blended into the audience. Fans poured onto the ice. Jimmy Ward of the Maroons got into a fight with one of them. Police had to quell a near riot. Reserve goaler Abby Cox came in relief of Roach and won the game. Roach was still dazed when it was over. He took 3 stitches to close his upper lip and he started the next game. He won that one. The next game, however, he was struck in the mouth once again, this time off a shot from Blackhawks forward Mush March. The wound required 7 more stitches to the lips and 5 inside his mouth. Newspapers reported that all of his teeth were loosened. He was replaced in the net by defenseman Doug Young, who only allowed 1 goal in 21 minutes of work. Roach missed 1 game and pitched a 1-0 shutout against the Americans on his return. However, Roach's next 3 games were all losses. He didn't look like himself. Post-concussion syndrome wasn't well understood in 1933. Adams decided to give him a week or 2 to rest. Roach had missed 5 games in his entire career to that point. Jack Adams was able to secure the services of Wilf Cude on loan from the Montreal Canadiens. Cude was 10 years Roach's junior and was considered a rising star in the IHL and Can-Am circuits. Cude played well enough in Roach's absence that he essentially took his job. Roach was sent down to the Syracuse Stars, where Cude had been playing before the loan. With Cude carrying the load in net, the Red Wings finished first in the league, but lost to the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup final. Cude was returned to Montreal following the loss. He became the Habs' starting goaltender for the next several seasons. Before the following season began, Adams traded defenseman Burr Williams to the St. Louis Eagles for goalie Normie Smith. Smith had played briefly for the Maroons, but got hurt in a game and never returned. In 1934, he had suffered a knee injury that kept him out of action for 2 months, but early reports stated Smith looked spectacular in net for the Red Wings. Roach started the year with the Wings' minor league affiliate, the Detroit Olympics. Adams had also signed a tubby, unproven goaltender to be the practice goalie for the 2 Detroit teams. His name was Turk Broda. Roach hazed him pitilessly. They would tease him for his appearance and for his habit of ending every sentence with the word, "see?" Roach took Broda's pants to the tailor while he was practicing and had the legs lengthened. Later, he'd take the pants again and have them shortened. One time, Roach made a phantom radio broadcast about Broda's sister. Another time, Roach, Alec Connell, and Roy Werders convinced Broda to pay a $25 enrollment fee into the fictitious Goal Minders Union. Broda got the money together, but they let him in on the gag before they took it from him. But there was very little levity on the ice that year. Before the end of December, the team had started to falter with Smith in net, and Adams feared his Wings had lost the fighting edge they'd shown the previous season. Roach was recalled in an effort to shake things up. Roach pitched back-to-back shutouts in his return. They were the 57th and 58th of his career. But eventually, the club faltered with Roach in front of them. The Wings went a full month without a win, from mid-January to mid-February. Smith was recalled and the team regained momentum, but the damage had been done. The Wings missed the playoffs. Roach finished out the final 3 games of the year, winning the final 2. They would be his last in the NHL. Adams cut Roach during the next training camp. His career was over. He was 35. Roach finished with the most games played, 5th most shutouts, and the 2nd most wins in league history, just 2 behind George Hainsworth. His goals against average was 8th best all time. He became a fixture 2 rows back of the Wings bench at the Olympia. He sold cars at a local Ford dealership. He was active in the old-timer circuit and later got into coaching in the International League. He passed away in 1973. Had he captured another Stanley Cup, or beaten Tiny Thompson for the Vezina in 1933, John Ross Roach would likely be a Hall of Famer today.
Hey everybody, it's Lucas here, just sliding in to remind you to like and subscribe if you enjoy these stories and you haven't already. And let me invite you once more to leave a comment if you have a story or a player or a team in mind that you'd like to explore in this format. I'll be happy to work on it for you. And now, onward and upward.
Johnny Bower is remembered today as a Hall of Fame goaltender and a legend of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But for most of his career, the National Hockey League didn't seem to want him. By the mid-1950s, Bower had already won championships, shattered records, and built a reputation as the best goaltender outside the NHL. Yet every time he reached the league, he was pushed back out. By the time he was in his mid-30s, it looked as though his NHL opportunities had been exhausted. This is the strange story of how one of hockey's greatest goalies almost never got his chance. After a hard-fought 7-game victory in the Calder Cup final, including a heartbreaking quadruple overtime loss in Game 6, the Cleveland Barons were champions for the 2nd time in 3 years. Their goalie, Johnny Bower, had built a reputation as a possible NHL talent in the 8 seasons he'd spent there. The Barons said they were willing to match any contract offer given to him by an NHL team, but felt they couldn't hold him back anymore, so they traded him to the New York Rangers. At the time, the Rangers had a reputation of being a goalie graveyard. They were the worst team in the league, winning only 17 games out of 70 in 1953. To make matters worse, their starting goalie that year was Gump Worsley, who was 4 years Bower's junior, and whose performance had earned him the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year, despite the poor record in the standings. Worsley had replaced former Hart Trophy winner and future Hall of Famer Chuck Rayner in net after a devastating knee injury prematurely shortened his career. Rayner would also attend training camp that year, but would act as more of a goalie coach than a player competing for a job. The Rangers decided that they would let Bower and Worsley duel it out in training camp for the starter's job. In those days, NHL teams didn't carry backup goalies on the playing roster. The stakes for the training camp duel were the difference between playing all year in the NHL or being banished across the continent to play for the Rangers' Western League affiliate, the Vancouver Canucks. Worsley was a Hall of Fame talent, but at 5'7" and visibly pudgy, the Rangers didn't believe in him. Bower got the nod. At age 28, he would be an NHL rookie. Under Rayner's tutelage, Bower added a new tool to his skill set, the poke check. Rayner would repeatedly drill Bower on his poke checking technique and coach him on when to decide to use it. Eventually, Bower would become synonymous with the poke check and would go down as the goalie who made the technique famous. That year, Bower didn't win the Calder Trophy, but he played every minute for the Rangers and helped the team do a 12-win improvement in the standings. His play was good enough that the Rangers submitted his name for Hart Trophy consideration. More importantly, with a healthy 2.54 goals against average and 5 shutouts on a poor defensive team, Bower proved he belonged in the NHL. Late that season, Bower's wife gave birth to their first child. The proud new father spent much of the off-season doting on his newborn son. Consequently, when Bower returned to training camp in fall 1954, he was slightly out of shape. Worsley, on the other hand, still stung by the demotion, returned focused and in excellent condition. As the preseason progressed, Rangers bench boss Muzz Patrick felt that Worsley was spectacular, a complete goalie. His impression of Bauer, on the other hand, was that he let in too many soft goals, and as the exhibition schedule progressed, Bauer saw less and less crease time. By the end of the preseason, Bauer was assigned to Vancouver. Nobody outside the Rangers organization understood the move. From the outside, it was a puzzling turn of events, but from the inside, it was a shrewd and calculated decision. One rumor that would surface in Blue Line magazine was that Bauer wasn't very well liked in the locker room. His competitive nature and focus made him seem like an unforgiving perfectionist to the defenseman. He would be visibly upset with teammates for defensive gaffes, while forgetting to reward or encourage teammates for making good plays. This dynamic was demonstrated by Bauer not being seen at the usual hangout spots the Rangers team were known to frequent. He subsequently developed a reputation as a loner. Still, the Rangers would be better served by sticking with the goalie who gave them the best chance to win every night, and Bauer seemed to do that more consistently than Worsley had. And winning, ultimately, makes great friendships. So the loner theory didn't seem an adequate explanation. One other theory is that the Rangers never wanted any of their goalies to feel comfortable with their importance to the team so that they could never ask for more money with conviction. Bauer proved to be too good for the Western League, but he patiently waited for a chance to prove himself again. He wouldn't have to wait long. In the 18th game of the season, on November 21st, Worsley suffered a bone chip on his ankle while making a save. Though goalies had always worn pads on their legs, goaltending techniques of the time often exposed the inside of the leg while attempting a kick save. Bauer was recalled to fill in while Worsley recovered. When his shot came, Bauer was ready. With Bauer in net, the Rangers got the better of a home-and-home series against the Boston Bruins, winning once and tying once. Bauer allowed 3 goals total in the 2 games. Patrick heaped praise on his fill-in goalie in the press. Worsley anxiously waited for his body to heal, fearing he might lose his starter's job again. Patrick used the media to fuel the fire, declaring that he would continue to start Bauer as long as he stayed hot. After 4 games in relief, Bauer had only allowed 7 goals, winning 2, losing 1, and tying 1. To that point, the Rangers had only won 6 of 18 games with Worsley in the net. Still, Bauer's leash was shorter than even he might have realized. When Bauer got shelled for a 6-1 loss at the hands of the dynastic Red Wings in the next game, Patrick pulled the plug and handed the net back to Worsley. 1 bad game, and he was reassigned to Vancouver on December 7th. By the end of the season, Bauer won the Outstanding Goaltending Award for the Western League, leading the circuit with a 2.71 goals against average and 7 shutouts. He would beat out rival Glenn Hall for the honor, but Hall's Edmonton Flyers would get the better of Bauer's Canucks on the way to their President's Cup championship. By the end of the NHL season, the Rangers had once again finished with 17 wins. Muzz Patrick was fired, and the Rangers brought in Phil Watson to replace him. Watson seemed to prefer Worsley over Bauer. During training camp, Watson tried to tinker with Bauer's technique, resulting in more goals allowed. When Bauer, frustrated with his authority-instituted lack of success, reverted to his familiar technique, and more success, Watson saw it as a sign of insubordination. Bauer was once again demoted, this time to the Providence Reds of the AHL. The Rangers improved by leaps and bounds in the standings, finishing with 32 wins under Watson and a playoff berth. They would go on to be the first of 10 straight victims of the Montreal Canadiens on their way to 5 straight championships. But Bauer's year in Providence would prove to be one of his happiest and personal best. After ferrying his family back and forth across the continent from New York to Vancouver and back to Providence, the Bauers fell in with the Lamorello family. The patriarch of the clan, Nicholas, was a Reds season ticket holder. He worked in the food industry, making deliveries. By a chance encounter, He saw Bauer at a restaurant and introduced himself, congratulating Bauer on his tremendous play. The two became friends, and the Lamorellos would have the Bauers over for dinner often. Bauer always seemed to play better after a meal at the Lamorellos. 60 years later, Bauer would call Nicholas Lamorello's son, Louis, to congratulate him on becoming the new general manager of the Maple Leafs. Another thing that made Bauer's time with the Reds a positive experience was the camaraderie. After every game, win or lose, the team would congregate around Bauer in appreciation of another fantastic performance. The Reds won 45 of 64 games that year, and Bauer would win the Les Cunningham Award as League MVP. The Reds would go on to win the Calder Cup, Bauer's fourth overall and third as a starter. By then, it was no longer an opinion, but a known fact in hockey, that Johnny Bauer was the best player not in the NHL. With the Rangers having just enjoyed a resurgent year under a new head coach, there was almost no chance that Bauer could wrestle the starter's job away from Worsley. Worsley's play was receiving raves of its own. Before the season began, Terry Sawchuk left the Boston Bruins for personal reasons, and there were rumors that Bauer would be traded there. The deal never materialized. The Bruins opted for a younger solution in net. At 31 years old, and with his NHL window closing, Bauer quietly accepted another demotion. This time he was happy to return where he and his family had found friendship and acceptance in hockey. That season, Bauer solidified his place as a minor league legend. He broke the long-standing AHL career shutout record with 37, accumulated between his time in Cleveland and Providence, and finished the season one game shy of the career record in that category. He might have claimed the record that season had he not been called up for 2 games with the Rangers to fill in for the injured Worsley. Bauer lost both games and was hastily reassigned. But by season's end, the AHL once again recognized Bauer as league MVP. The Reds played a run-and-gun style of offense that often left their goalie out to dry. More often than not, Bauer would bail them out. Thanks to Bauer's steadying presence, the Reds claimed their second straight regular season title, though they fell short in the playoffs when their offense failed them against Rochester. Bauer was just the second AHL player to win back-to-back MVP trophies, and he had been the first goalie to win one altogether. That season, the Rangers finished in 4th place again, and lost to Montreal in 5 games of the first round once more. That summer, the Rangers wanted to move Marcel Paillet, another of the goaltenders down their depth chart, from the Cleveland Barons to another club. However, Cleveland was an independent team and not part of New York's farm system. Paillet's NHL rights belonged to New York, but the Rangers had an agreement with the Barons that the big league club couldn't send Paillet to another team. To get out of the deal, the Rangers offered Bauer, along with his full professional rights. Cleveland leapt at the deal and sent defenseman Ed McQueen and an undisclosed amount of cash over to New York to complete the transaction. Bauer's time with the Rangers was over. He had gotten his professional shot. He'd proven that he belonged among the game's greats. And though he was frustrated that he couldn't maintain ground at the highest level, his new deal ensured that he could retire with the club where his professional journey had started. Still, the thought of chasing NHL glory never left Bauer's mind. He couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if he'd ever gotten another real shot. He finished the year in Cleveland with the all-time AHL record for most games played and wins for a goaltender, to go along with his shutout record, which now stood at 45. In the summer of 1958, new Toronto bench boss Punch Imlich, who had a reputation for favoring veteran players, convinced Maple Leafs brass to take Bauer in the interleague draft. For just the second time, and at age 34, Bauer had a legitimate shot at a full-time NHL job. But that's another story, and another career altogether.
From 1957 to 1964, Andy Bathgate was the only superstar on a bad New York Rangers team. During that span, he scored more points and assists than any other player in the league, and represented the Blue Shirts in the All-Star game every year. He won the Hart Trophy in 1959 as league MVP, and shared the league lead in scoring in 1962, but didn't win the Art Ross Trophy because Bobby Hull had more goals. Anyway, the Rangers only made the playoffs 3 times in that span and never won a round. At the 1964 trade deadline, Bathgate was shipped to the Maple Leafs where he won the Stanley Cup. At that point, he had a full Hall of Fame resume, all boxes checked. But by 1967, he was considered washed. From the time he entered the league in 1952, he'd been playing with 2 knee braces. Wear and tear had whittled down his speed and movement. He was 35 years old, recovering from thumb and groin injuries, had been sent down to the minors by parent club Detroit earlier in the year. In fact, the groin injury was chronic. It had bothered him since 1964, playing through pain every time he laced up his skates. That summer, the Red Wings left him exposed in the expansion draft. The original 6 clubs could only protect 11 players and 1 goalie before the draft, so the fact that he was left unprotected wasn't that shocking. For every player chosen, the club had the opportunity to then protect another exposed player. Even the fact that he had gone untouched for 18 rounds of selection didn't shock observers, nor that 17 other Red Wings had been selected ahead of him, which meant that the club had that many opportunities to protect him before the next selection. What shocked observers was that he was finally taken at all, 112th in the draft by the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was coming off a disappointing 31-point year, and most didn't believe he could help an expansion team. The lone dissenting opinion belonged to Red Sullivan, Bathgate's former captain and teammate with the Rangers, now coach of the Penguins. It was Sullivan who convinced Penn's GM Jack Riley to roll the dice on Bathgate. Earlier in the draft, much earlier, the Penguins had made Earl Ingerfield their first choice of skater, 17th overall. Ingerfield had been Bathgate's centerman the year he won the Hart Trophy and notched 40 goals. Sullivan brainstormed the reunion. He also decided to drive Bathgate harder than any other player during training camp and practice. The tactic worked. Bathgate scored 6 goals and 8 points in the Penguins' first 8 games and was top 10 in league scoring by the end of the first month, one of only 2 expansion players on the list. But on October 25th, Ingerfield suffered a bone chip in his knee against the Seals. The injury kept him out of action for 19 games. The Penguins stayed around 500 through the end of November. Bathgate was their most potent offensive weapon, remaining at a point per game. More importantly, he was playing aggressive, skating hard, and defending with renewed vigor. His hustling play was an inspiration to teammates. But by December, the scoring started to dry up. In his estimation, he was shooting less. When Ingerfield returned, it was with new line mates. By January, the Penguins were hard bitten by the injury bug. Just as soon as one line combo started finding chemistry, one of the forwards would get hurt, and Sullivan would have to reshuffle the deck. Ice time increased for the healthy veterans, Bathgate among them. Eventually, fatigue started to set in. The wins-losses record suffered as a result. By mid-March, the Pens had faded from the race. Popular opinion was that the Pens were too old to maintain their place in the standings. The Penguins were still in the hunt by late March, but even a last-minute 5-1-1 push to close the season couldn't salvage it. The one loss that came in those last 7 games was a 3-0 shutout at the hands of 4th-place Minnesota. That game was the difference. The Penguins came out flying with 14 shots in the first period, including 2 breakaways, but North Stars goalie Cesar Maniago was equal to the task. When the final horn sounded on the season, the Penguins finished 2 points back of the Stars for the final playoff spot. But Bathgate had enjoyed a resurgent season as the featured weapon. He finished with 20 goals and 59 points to lead all West Division scorers, totals he hadn't reached since the year he ended as champion in '64. Everywhere Red Sullivan had ever been had been a loser. As a player with the Rangers, the team had been a loser. Then as coach with the Rangers, a loser. Now, as coach of the Penguins, he was still part of a losing atmosphere. By the end of the first season in Pittsburgh, the rumor was already out there that he'd be fired. So in training camp 68, he made a drastic move. He decided that the team would be better off without Andy Bathgate. Though one of the fittest players in the game, at 36, Bathgate was struggling to get into game shape. Watching Bathgate that preseason, Sullivan decided that his legs were gone. He was still a wizard with the puck, but if he couldn't get to the puck, he was ineffective. Once again, onlookers were shocked. This time, they were shocked to see Sullivan banish his top scorer and good friend to the minors. There was no doubt that the move negatively affected the Penguins' forward group and overall attack. After scoring a total of 4 goals in their first 4 games and starting the year winless in 5, Sullivan had every reason to recall Bathgate, but he stuck to his guns. By season's end, the Penguins won only 20 games. At 51 points, they tied for last place overall, with the North Stars of all teams. And their 189 goals for were also tied with Minnesota for third fewest. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of the story here. At the beginning of October, Riley and Sullivan had a sit-down meeting with their star forward. At the time, Bathgate was 5th on the NHL's all-time scoring list. They offered him a $30,000 a year coaching job. It was outside the NHL, but they believed it was a solid opportunity for him. Bathgate said no. He wanted to keep playing. Riley said they'd try to trade him somewhere else, but Bathgate wanted them to send him to Vancouver to play for the Western League's Canucks. And so Riley, Sullivan, and the Vancouver Canucks accommodated Bathgate's request. The Canucks were delighted. Bathgate had played for the team before, back when they were the Rangers Farm Club. After helping the junior Guelph Biltmores to a Memorial Cup in 1952, the Rangers sent him to Vancouver, where he developed a special attachment to the city. It was there that he met his wife, Merle Lewis. The couple married in 1955 and had lived in the East ever since. The Bathgates were looking forward to having their 2 children get to know their grandparents. Andy's older brother Bernie had helped lead the Canucks to their first 2 Western League titles in 1946 and 48. For their part, the Canucks were a tentpole franchise of the WHL, but hadn't enjoyed a truly marketable star player since ever. They had missed the playoffs the year before and brought in coach Joe Crozier to right the ship. Crozier had helmed the Rochester Americans to 4 straight Calder Cup finals and 3 victories. Crozier felt Bathgate's influence right away in training camp. During drills or scrimmages, if he noticed somebody doing something wrong, he'd stop the play and explain the right way to them. Coach Crow nodded his approval and stitched an A on Bathgate's sweater. Observers and onlookers noted that Bathgate was the hardest worker on the team. The club hadn't won a Western League title since 1960. Now, with Bathgate on the team, that old championship feeling was permeating the brand new Pacific Coliseum. But as the season got underway, the Canucks were just okay. 500 by late November and struggling to separate from the pack. Bathgate was sensational to start the year. He scored 8 goals in the first 8 games on a top line with John Gofton and Jermaine Gagnon. But by New Year's, he was nowhere near top 10 in league scoring, well behind mainstays and established Western League stars Gal Fielder, Art Jones, and Willie O'Ree. And yet the Canucks found themselves in a junkyard brawl for first place. The groin injury that had bothered him since his time with the Leafs was still like a second shadow. It had started as a small lump in his leg and slowly worked its way up into his abdomen. He couldn't even stretch for fear of blacking out from pain. Sometimes he almost blacked out during games. The first period is always still pretty rough, he said. I have to force myself to keep going until it loosens up. Even with a faulty groin, Bathgate seemed to make everyone around him better. Phil Maloney and Len Lundy both got boosts after being inserted on his line at various points. Bathgate himself wound up with a club-leading 37 goals and 73 points for third best. The Canucks settled comfortably into second place after an up-and-down campaign. The thing that settled matters was the acquisition of veteran netminder Charlie Hodge, who'd been sent down from the parent club, the NHL's Oakland Seals. Hodge went 7-2-4 during the home stretch of the regular season with a .925 save percentage and a 2.54 goals against average. Coach Crow was disappointed with the second-place finish. He predicted at the beginning of the year that Bathgate would be the difference between second and first place. When the season was finished, he asked Bathgate, "Tell me why I didn't send you back to Pittsburgh when I had the chance." Bathgate flashed his smile and left the room. When he was gone, Crow called him my leader, on and off the ice. In the playoffs, the Canucks didn't lose a game as they rode Hodge and barnstormed their way past Seattle Totems and Portland Buckaroos to take the Lester Patrick Cup in 8 straight. They outscored their opponents 35-12 in those 8 games. Bathgate picked up 8 points. Back in Pittsburgh, Red Sullivan's gamble had cost him his job. The feeling over there was that the team had given up on Bathgate way too early. But there was just one problem. He didn't want to go back. He was happy in Vancouver, his wife was happy, and he was winning. Before the spring was over, he told Riley he'd like to be sent back down to Vancouver again. The Penguins wanted him back in the lineup to help their rebuild. He told the Pens that he didn't trust that his bad knees could hold up in the NHL again. Twice the previous season, the Penguins had wanted to recall Bathgate, but were told his injury hadn't healed. Riley swung a deal with Crow to send Canucks top-line pivot Brian Hextall Jr. and an amount of cash to the Steel City for 2 players to be named after the NHL draft. Those 2 players would be winger Paul Andrea and hard-nosed defenseman John Arbour. Those 2 would combine for 126 points for the Canucks, with Andrea picking up 91 of them, and 264 penalty minutes, with Arbour picking up 251 of those. An added stipulation to the trade was that if Bathgate didn't make the Penguins roster at the end of 1969 training camp, they would agree to send him back to Vancouver. During camp, the Penguins used Bathgate sparingly. It didn't take them long to make their decision. Riley called up Crow and told him over the phone, "I've got your Christmas present early this year." Bathgate had once again been assigned to Vancouver. When he arrived at the Coliseum, his old familiar number 9 was waiting for him, but this time, there was a Captain C on the front of it. That year, the Canucks once again found themselves in a dogfight in the standings early on. But by the end of the calendar year, the Canucks found themselves on top of the pile. By late January, they were 19 points ahead of second place. Bathgate was the Canucks' not-so-secret weapon. He forechecked aggressively, digging in the corners, throwing elbows, tapping cups with his stick, and skating better than he had in years. Aside from taking a regular double shift, he also skated on both special teams. Some nights he skated in excess of 40 minutes. The net result was the only 100-point season in his Hall of Fame career. He finished second in league scoring with 108 points to Art Jones's ridiculous 127. His reward was the George Leader Cup as league MVP. The personal totals are even more impressive when weighed against the season-long distraction of the Canucks' NHL expansion bid and Crow's place in it. When the club was purchased by Tom Scallon in December, he had no loyalty to Crow. When the club announced that they would be bringing in Bud Poyle to be the new GM, Crow rejected it, not wanting to be relegated to just coaching the team. Before long, he was fired and eventually sued the team. For a time during the 1970 season, the club had no coach. They offered Bathgate the job. He turned it down, but agreed to run practices until they found a replacement. When asked if he'd be back in an NHL Canucks uniform, Bathgate told them he was 99% sure he wouldn't. But he didn't rule out returning to the Western League, perhaps with the Seattle Totems. Some speculated that Crow was going to buy the Totems and install Bathgate as playing coach. Even from before the first moment the Canucks officially entered the NHL, They've been embroiled in drama and intrigue, and it has rarely gotten better since then. But I digress. By season's end, the Lester Patrick Cup would once again belong to the Canucks. Bathgate's final act as team captain was lifting the championship trophy after getting by the San Diego Gulls and Buckaroos once again. When it was over, Bathgate told the team that he didn't want to return with the NHL version of the team, even if a deal could be reached with the Penguins. That summer he reported once again to Penguins training camp. Bathgate returned to a Penguins team orbited by existential questions. Club majority owner Donald Parsons was in financial hot water, and the Penguins were possibly up for sale. Nobody even knew whether the team would stay in Pittsburgh long term. Season ticket sales were up to a new team record 5,000 for the upcoming year, though, after a decent initial playoff run. The star of the run, however, rookie center Michel Briere, was in a hospital bed in Quebec, with no hope of ever getting out again. For more on that story, see our second video, or our more recent 70s edition Rabbit Holes compilation. Anyway, this left Pittsburgh once again without a strong presence down the middle. Bathgate still wasn't sure whether or not he'd be able to return to the NHL. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to, but he reported to camp with an open mind. He didn't want to make the team just to sit on the bench. If he was going to play at age 38, the desire was going to have to be there. Of 61 camp invitees, Bathgate was once again among the hardest workers. Penn's coach and GM and former Maple Leafs teammate Red Kelly gave him the nod as the club's top-line center. He signed a pro contract on the eve of the season. Game number 7 of the season would be his 1,000th NHL game. But from the start of the campaign, something was off. According to Bathgate, Kelly had promised him a regular shift but didn't deliver. When he complained, Kelly saw it as selfishness. There would be no 40-minute night for Bathgate in Pittsburgh. No real opportunity for his stiff muscles to loosen up. By the end of the season, he estimated he was averaging less than 5 or 6 minutes a night. One night at MSG, in front of the people that remembered him best, he played a single 2-minute shift on the power play. He thought that if he could get more ice time, he could prove his worth, and his time on ice would snowball. But he was resigned to the role that Kelly offered him. Still, he produced at a respectable rate. Even at less than 6 minutes a night, on 2 bum knees and a gimpy groin, he picked up 44 points, good for 3rd in team scoring. He passed Rocket Richard for 6 on the all-time scoring list while he was at it. The Pens were the last team to be eliminated, but finished a full 10 points out of a playoff spot. There was no miracle finish, no playoff push. Just a reminder that sometimes even the best players can be left out of the conversation, and that desire and an iron spirit can overcome a broken body, but few leave the game on their own terms.
At age 10, Jean Ratelle was enrolled in Roussan Academy in Montreal. There, he formed a dynamic duo with winger Rod Gilbert. For 5 years, they rarely lost a game together. Then, at age 16, Gilbert left for Guelph, Ontario to play with the Rangers junior team, the Biltmores. Ratelle was left behind. In Guelph, Gilbert would take every opportunity to tell coach Eddie Bush about his buddy over at Roussan. Day after day, he would pester Bush to bring Ratelle onto the team, praising his skill, claiming that Ratelle was an even better hockey player than he was. Bush agreed to give him a look. Gilbert wasn't wrong. Ratelle made an immediate impact, helping the team improve by 28 points in the standings, jumping from last place to 3rd. Over the following 2 years, he scored 187 points in 95 games in Guelph. In 1961, he made his NHL debut, scoring 2 goals and 3 points in 3 games with the Rangers. Just 3 years earlier, nobody even knew his name. Ratelle was a big guy, but he never threw his weight around. In a career that spanned over 20 years, he never got into a single fight. He never even swore. Perhaps it was his mild manners that kept him off the radar.
Over the next couple seasons, after graduating from juniors, Ratelle bounced up and down between Manhattan and Baltimore, the Rangers' primary farm team. The Rangers insisted that Gilbert and Ratelle were the future. But in his first lengthy call-up, Ratelle notched 4 goals and 12 points in 31 games and was labeled a bust. They said he wasn't aggressive enough, didn't dig the puck out of the corners, or fly around at top speed the way Gilbert did. He didn't hit back. There were those who thought he just didn't measure up to the big league standard of play. Sometime during the 1963-64 season, he suffered a back injury. It seemed like a small thing at the time. He didn't miss any games, and it wasn't even reported on in the press. But in late 1966, X-rays revealed that he'd been playing with a broken back. His career, and likely even his prospects of living a comfortable life, were in the hands of the Rangers' husky, cigar-chomping team doctor, Kazuo Yanagisawa. He was the only one allowed to smoke in the Rangers' dressing room. He would approach an injured player and tell him, "I know it hurts, but you're not playing any sissy sport." Often, he'd get players to punch him in the stomach as hard as they could. Yanagisawa had performed a career-saving spinal fusion surgery 2 months earlier on Gilbert. When he returned to action, Gilbert was a new man. Ratelle became one of 5 Rangers to undergo the surgery, as well as Eric Nestorenko of the Blackhawks and Phil Jackson of the Knicks. All returned to action. Ratelle's return, however, was complicated. After holding out for a better contract, he started the 1965 season with the Clippers. But when he scored 9 goals in 8 games, it was obvious he'd outgrown the minors. He was never sent back down again. By the end of the 1966 season, Ratelle had worked his way up to number 1 center. That's when the X-ray took place. Ratelle was out of action for the first 2 months of the 67 season, recovering. When he returned to the lineup, he clearly wasn't himself. He scored 6 goals and 11 points in a limited role in 41 games. Before the following season, Gilbert once again lobbied for his good buddy Ratelle. Rangers coach Emile Francis put the two of them together on a line with rugged left-winger Vic Hadfield, and they formed a perfect trio. They came to be known as the goal-a-game, or gag line. Hadfield could work the corners or take hacks in the slot. Gilbert would find the soft spots, and Ratelle would distribute. What made them particularly effective was their ability to find each other blind through traffic. They became one of the most consistent scoring threats in the league. Year after year, they would produce just as their name implied. Coach Francis claimed Ratelle never had a bad practice, let alone a bad game. He was a stickler for habits. He stuck with a flat blade well after the trend for curving sticks had taken off. It gave him a deadly backhand. Off the ice, he played the stock market, smart and steady, like his on-ice game. Never speculating, making good investments, and parking excess capital in saving bonds to check inflation. He hated to travel because it took time away from watching his children grow. Therefore, he put a special emphasis on performing well in road games so that the trip wouldn't be a total waste. He refused to eat pork the night before a game, and if you were with him, you couldn't have more than 3 beers either. He was strict about not having sex before a game, and made Gilbert follow his example. Ratelle said, "Well, if I don't, you don't." Gilbert replied, "How the hell does that apply to me?" One night, Gilbert stayed out late with friends. During the next game in Chicago, Gilbert threw the puck in the corner for Ratelle, but he refused to retrieve it. Back on the bench, Gilbert asked, "What's the matter with you?" Ratelle replied, "You showed me little respect. You don't want to play." "What do you mean I don't want to play? I'm playing. Let's go." No, Ratelle said. "God only helps those who help themselves." Game day meals would be early, 6 hours before puck drop. Then he would get to the rink to concentrate on the game and to prepare sticks. By 1971, Ratelle enjoyed his 4th straight 70-plus point season and was recognized with the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy for dedication to hockey and perseverance. Modest and polite, almost to a fault, he epitomized the classy center. Ratelle commanded so much respect around the league for his ability and style of play that he never had to take the kinds of abuse usually doled out for top-line players. He let his playmaking do his fighting for him. He said,
If I'd been the kind of guy to fight and play rough, I don't think I would have achieved what I have achieved. New York Post columnist Larry Merchant once said that Jean Ratelle is the kind of hockey player all the ruffians would be if they had his ability.
The New York Rangers were winners of 3 straight. They'd been down 2-1 against the Ken Drydenless Montreal Canadiens and stormed back to a 6-game victory. The Rangers were the only team in the league to win the season series against their next opponent, the Philadelphia Flyers, going 2-2 against them. Game 1 was a hard-fought, tight-checking affair. Scoring chances were hard to come by, but the Flyers capitalized on theirs, taking advantage of awkward and sloppy plays. The Flyers roughed up the more skilled and less scrappy Rangers forwards. Early on, Bobby Clarke and Andre Moose DuPont sandwiched Rangers center Walt Chuck and laid him out for 5 minutes. He didn't return. Dave Schultz was up to his typical antics, nearly hitting a linesman on his way to the penalty box after receiving offsetting roughing minors with Rangers forward Bill Fairburn, then later received a misconduct for complaining to the referee about what he thought was a quick whistle on a delayed penalty to Rangers defender Ron Harris. On the ensuing power play, McClish opened the scoring on a deflection. He would add another marker late in the third period, continuing his hot play. Aside from manhandling the Rangers, another effective game plan for the Flyers was disrupting Rangers all-star goalie Ed Jacquemin's puck handling, as they were able to beat him to the puck and slow him up on his return to the crease, and capitalize when he had lost his stick. For his part, Jacquemin promised to use his stick for self-defense next time the tactic was employed. At the other end of the ice, Bernie Parent faced only 19 shots, with just 3 in the first period, and stopped them all, earning his first career playoff shutout. It was obvious on the first shift that Game 2 would be a lively affair, which played to Philadelphia's strengths. 19 seconds into the contest, hound dog Bob Kelly mugged young Jerry Butler along the boards, pummeling him. Butler did what he could to defend himself. The tone was then set for a fiercely contested game. After serving a fighting major for his trouble, Butler did not return to the game. The Flyers hit everything that moved, but the Rangers hung in and counterattacked. Once again, Clarke was a thorn in the side of Tkachuk, but the Rangers forward was up for it. On 3 separate occasions, the two of them took offsetting minors for their stick-swinging battles, which must be some kind of record. Tkachuk finished with no points, but held Clarke to just 1 goal and a -1 rating despite winning 20 of 27 faceoffs. The game remained spirited throughout, with 23 minor penalties assessed along with 4 fighting majors, many of those of the retaliatory nature by the Rangers. A total of 66 minutes in penalties were doled out. The game stayed close, but Jacquemin was tested continually as the Rangers took penalty after penalty. Midway through the second, a tying goal was waved off, and as often happened in that situation, the Flyers subsequently scored. Veteran defender Ed Van Impe took a fluttering shot which was deflected by Rangers defender Rod Sealing. Jacquemin thought he had a handle on the loose, bouncing puck and waited for a whistle, but was greeted instead by the red goal light. Incensed, Jacquemin banged his stick on the glass in front of the goal judge. Rangers coach Emile the Cat Francis pulled Jacquemin from the game momentarily, allowing him to regain his composure. Reliever Gilles Villemure saw no action and came back out after a minute and a half. The Flyers took a 2-1 lead into the third, and the Rangers had a tying goal waved off, then fell victim to a shorthanded goal in an empty net to retake a 2-goal lead, as Francis had pulled Jacquemin for a 6-on-4 opportunity on the power play. The Rangers would get one back seconds later on the same power play. Flyers winger Gary Dornhofer and Rangers defender Jim Chief Nielsen traded minors for roughing and elbowing. When Dornhofer returned to play, he dished the puck from behind the net to McLeish, the leading scorer in the playoffs, who capitalized with less than 4 minutes to play, sealing the win for the Flyers, who added an empty netter for a 5-2 victory. The series then headed to Madison Square Garden, the Rangers' famous home, where the Rangers had only won once in the previous 14 tries. This time, the Rangers were ready. After being beaten and battered, the Rangers had a solid game plan and had the skill and tenacity to execute it. They would attack the Flyers' defenders where they lived, finishing checks and rushing outlet passes which supporting forwards intercepted easily. With quick puck movement in the attacking zone, the Rangers were able to keep relentless pressure on Perron and keep the Broad Street bullies on their back feet. The plan worked. The Rangers managed to cut the Flyers' Game 2 shot total in half, from 30 down to 15. The Rangers didn't get sucked into undisciplined penalties this time. They stuck to their game plan. The Flyers handed the Rangers 7 power plays running around defending. The Rangers capitalized on 2 of them. Dave Schultz set the tone once again, earning 19 minutes in penalties in the first 3 minutes of the game, after fighting Brad Park and taking charging, roughing, fighting, and misconduct penalties. They were down 3-1 just after the midway mark of the second, and the fans at MSG were showering their team with booze. Then, about 2.5 minutes later, Joe Watson took a holding penalty and Rangers sophomore Steve Vickers buries one just seconds into the man advantage. The Rangers found their momentum and 50-goal man Vic Hadfield scored the equalizer in the dying minutes of the period. In the third, Brad Park scored on another holding penalty, this time by Jimmy Watson, and Rod Gilbert added a dagger. Now with a comfortable lead, the Rangers finally allowed themselves the luxury of retaliation, and the last few minutes of the game were scrappy. Dornhofer and Vickers fought, and Flyers winger Ross Lonsberry jumped in, earning himself a game misconduct. On the next shift, Schultz and DuPont each took misconduct penalties, and Schultz and Ron Harris were each slapped with delay of game penalties. Next shift after that, Park and McClish got into a stick-swinging battle, and were both slapped with high sticking and fighting penalties. But eventually, a hockey game broke out, and the Rangers came out on top of it. Before the puck drop of Game 4, the 17,500 in attendance at MSG wanted Flyers blood. One memorable sign hung from the balcony read, "Dave Schul's Fan Club." The name was misspelled, and the Z was stylized as a swastika. Surprisingly, Schultz didn't take a penalty in the game. The Flyers team, however, took 12 of them, half of them for rough and careless stick work. Regardless, Flyers defender Joe Watson sent a short slapper past Jacquemin for a 1-0 lead late in the first. The Rangers were battered and snake-bitten. When they were finally awarded a goal, no one was sure it should have counted. Bobby Rousseau took a shot that Perrant batted upward and fell behind him. Before it hit the ice, Perrant knocked it with his stick. The goal judge lit the lamp. The puck landed on the safe side of the goal line. Television replays couldn't resolve the issue. Down the ice, a sloppy Rangers line change resulted in 8 men on the ice when the goal light was lit. The goal counted. After a tense and well-played third period, the score stood at 1 apiece. In the overtime period, Rod Gilbert missed a line change and, gassed, just hung around the Flyers' net. Steve Vickers sent a shot on goal, and Gilbert shoveled the puck between Perron's legs for the winning score, which tied the series heading back to the Spectrum. But that almost seemed secondary. Moments earlier, Rangers fans got their blood wish. Rangers defenseman Dale Rolfe sent a rising slap shot which hit Flyers defender Barry Ashby in his right eye, full bore. Ashby was in agony. He crumpled to the ice, blood spurting from the wound. The crowd was silent. Rolfe felt sick to his stomach. 4 police officers and 2 teammates propped Ashby onto a wooden board, then dragged him off the ice. He'd never play again. The saddest part was that Ashby was arguably one of the Flyers' cleanest players, and an all-star defender. Having lost 2 straight and their best defender, the Flyers needed a change of fortune, so they turned to a good luck charm that almost always delivered. Before the game, Kate Smith performed God Bless America in lieu of the national anthem. She was the Flyers' secret weapon. Typically, her performance stirred the hearts and minds of the crowd and galvanized the spirits of the players. The Flyers' record when she performed the song was 33-3-1. But on this night, the Flyers came out flat. Pete Stemkowski beat Perrant from in close. When the first period was finished, The Flyers had managed just 5 feeble shots. The Flyers' offensive strategy was to defend until contact separated the opponent from the puck, then send breakout passes to the wings and smash anything that gets in the way. The plan sounds clunky, but it was effective. The Flyers were just the 3rd team in league history to win 50 games in a season. But in this game, the strategy stopped working. The Rangers disrupted their timing, and the Flyers' breakout passes were off target. So, Fred Shero simply changed the strategy. Instead of breakout passes, the Flyers' defenders would carry the puck up ice. Once they did this, the Flyers became unstoppable. 4-1 Flyers final. Kate Smith had struck again. Game 6 at MSG was arguably the best of the series. For the most part, the Flyers played the game fair and straight. The bulk of it was played as a one-on-one draw. The two teams traded chances, each goalie making spectacular saves. But early in the third, the Rangers got 2 quick goals and ended up winning 4-1. As the final minutes ticked off the clock, Rangers fans broke out into a spontaneous rendition of God Bless America. Winner-take-all Game 7 was played at the Spectrum. The winner would go on to face the Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final. Before the game, the Flyers once again turned to Kate Smith for inspiration, though it was to her record, not a live performance. It didn't matter. The Flyers came out flying. Their breakout passes along the boards were crisp and generated panic and chaos among the Rangers' backline. Attempts to stand up the Flyers' attack would be met with a knockdown. Rangers goalie Ed Jockeman played one of the best games of his career, but was abandoned by his own defenders on too many chances. Eventually, the score tilted 3-1 for the Flyers. In the third, Steve Vickers cut the lead by 1, but Gary Dornhofer scored off the ensuing faceoff. After that, the Rangers took over. The Flyers collapsed into a defensive shell, sitting back and dumping the puck. It led to numerous chances for the Rangers, but Perrant bailed them out often. The Rangers cut the lead once again. Then, with a minute to go, Jockeman was pulled for an extra skater. Don Selesky corralled the puck and sent a shot toward the open net. It banged off the end boards and the whistle blew. Everybody was confused. This was before the days of no-touch icing. With under a minute to go and the season in the balance, the Rangers had been called for too many men on the ice. A congratulatory telegram from Kate Smith circulated in the press box. It was a pathetic end to what some in the press had called the greatest playoff series they had ever seen. Pete Stemkowski banged his stick on the ice. Rod Gilbert hung his head. Steve Vickers told the media they'd choked. He said he wished he could play against the Rangers. Walt Tkachuk played most of the series with a protective shield around his broken jaw. He also sported a beard. It was supposed to be my good luck charm, he said. It didn't work. Together, the Flyers and Rangers combined for the highest penalty minute total in playoff history with 408. The Flyers set the single-team record in a series with 252. The Flyers gave 53-man advantages to the Rangers, but only surrendered 4 goals, killing the final 23 of the series. During the regular season, the Rangers had converted 29.6% of their chances. We really had to work like hell to beat a fine team like the Rangers, Shero said. They would face the only team with a better record than them.
His career highlights read like a Hall of Fame resume. His first-round pick in 1982. He played with both Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. He scored 12 points in 6 games with the Kings in 1988. The following season, he went beast mode on the Oilers in the playoffs, scoring 8 goals in a 7-game series. He scored 4 goals in the Tampa Bay Lightning's first ever game. To this day, no one has topped that mark. He won a silver medal at the Olympics on a line with Paul Kariya. And yet his career ended with only 230 NHL games. Today, only serious hockey nerds like myself even recognize the name of Chris Kontos. Now, how did it all happen? Christmas Eve 1982, just weeks after his 19th birthday.
Kontos was just about to leave his uncle's cabin in Wabashine, Ontario, when they called him back. Walking back to the cabin, his mother told him, "Your Christmas present just arrived," and handed him the phone. On the line was Rangers GM Craig Patrick. Kontos was to report to the big team in Pittsburgh. The Rangers couldn't ignore his production with the Marlies any longer. 21 goals and 54 points in 28 games. Now, the numbers would be put to the test. His first 8 games with the Rangers were a sensation. He became the first Rangers rookie to score 2 goals in his home debut. After losing his first game, the Blue Shirts went undefeated in the next 7. He bagged 4 goals with a +5 rating in that stretch. But after that, the offense dried up. For everybody. The Rangers sputtered to a 1-9-4 streak that saw the team score 2 or fewer goals 9 times. None of it was on Kontos, not the hot streak or the faceplant, but he got dragged under the wheels of it regardless. Later, he admitted that the pressure of being a first-round pick got into his head. When he tamped down his doubts and was ready to face the pressures again, he made a couple mistakes that destroyed his confidence. Coach Herb Brooks relegated Kontos to spot duty on the 4th line. He finished the campaign with a modest 8 goals and 15 points in 44 games. With a late-season push, the Rangers evened their record and made the playoffs. But come playoff time, he was a healthy scratch. A string of minor league call-ups superseded his place in the lineup. Brooks told him not to be disappointed and to wait for his chance next year. But during Rangers training camp that September, Kontos didn't survive the cuts. He was assigned to the Rangers CHL affiliate in Tulsa, but he didn't report. Instead, he requested a trade and returned home. Kontos got the impression that he had no future with the Rangers. The Rangers suspended him. When it became clear that no trade was coming, he retired. He enrolled at University of Toronto and was set to start classes in the new year. Patrick visited the Kontos home to hold a desperate face-to-face meeting, pleading with him not to throw his career away. Patrick told him that he was part of the Rangers' plans and to give his career a chance. Kontos was moved by the gesture and heard him out. Finally, he reported. But for some, especially Tulsa head coach Tom Webster, the damage had been done. The quick and early retirement was seen as an immature move, and there would be no rehabilitating his reputation. About a month later, Kontos was recalled by the Rangers, but there would be no hot streak this time. After 6 unproductive games, he was sent back to the Oilers, though not necessarily in Tulsa. Financial difficulties caused the team to fold mid-season and play out the entire last 6 weeks of their schedule on the road. Despite this, he finished out the year with a tidy 18 points in 21 games. That 1984 Tulsa Oilers team is probably the only professional sports team to win a championship after folding, but I digress. He kept a positive attitude when he was assigned to New Haven after training camp 1984. He picked up 7 goals and 13 points in his first 14 games before a slew of injuries on the big club forced a recall to Manhattan. This time he was slightly more productive, picking up 12 points in 28 games, but Coach Brooks limited his ice time and moved him from center to left wing. Because the center iceman has so many responsibilities, and Kontos didn't backcheck very well, the move made sense in theory. But in practice, it only led to more confusion. He started picking up a reputation of being one-dimensional. He was sent back down when defenseman Reijo Ruotsalainen was moved to the wing. By the end of the season, Kontos finished with a respectable 43 points in 48 Nighthawks games. Patrick signed him to a new deal for the 1985-86 season. He put up 23 points in 21 games for the Nighthawks, but decided to pause mid-sentence. After being yo-yoed up and down from the minors to the majors, and bounced around positionally for several seasons, Kontos' game had deteriorated. He had self-identified several problems, and while his dream had always been to be an NHL regular, he knew he'd have to find a different venue to work them out. So he went over to Finland. He scored 31 points in 36 games for the Ilves club before returning to Rangers camp in '86. Playing in Finland for half a year added further complications. Though he felt he had fixed his issues overseas, when he returned, he was given the same deployment as he had before, and the old habits returned. To make matters worse, he was no longer accustomed to the aggressive style of play in North America. Once again, he didn't survive the final roster cuts. Before signing him, new Rangers GM Phil Esposito assured him that if the Rangers weren't going to use him, they'd find a place for him to play. The following season, he produced 31 points in 36 games once again, this time in New Haven. But Trader Phil was as good as his word, shipping Kontos to Pittsburgh for his old buddy and teammate Ron Duguay. On his way out of town, Esposito said, "I think Chris Kontos was ruined by being brought up too early and being played sparingly." Not everyone agreed that Kontos had been ruined. At 23, he still had upside, and most NHL scouts figured he would eventually become a regular. Penguins GM Eddie Johnston brought him in because the club's offense needed a boost. Kontos had good hands and skill. When Kontos arrived, the Pens had just gotten Mario Lemieux back after missing him for 13 games. They were winless in 5. Kontos' first game with the Penguins, against Vancouver, Lemieux scored a hat trick, and Kontos added a goal of his own. Though he didn't often play with Lemieux on the ice, they went head-to-head regularly in the Nintendo game Blades of Steel. According to Kontos, Mario was as good with the controller as he was with the hockey stick. Kontos seemed to fit in well with the Penguins, chipping in with 17 points in 31 games, though they ultimately failed in their playoff bid that year. But the next season, he was utilized as a defensive forward. New head coach Pierre Creamer made him a penalty killer and a defensive zone face-off specialist. Never known as a fast skater, when the puck moved up ice, Kontos wasn't allowed to cross the center ice line. He would have to change for Mario or Dan Quinn. He scored just 1 goal in 36 games. In January of '88, he was dispatched to Muskegon to get him some ice time and to get his confidence back up. Less than a month later, he was shipped to Los Angeles. By coincidence, the New Haven Nighthawks had become the Kings affiliate. He was back on familiar ice and responded with an 8-goal and 24-point outburst in 16 games. When Kings center Bernie Nichols was served a 5-game suspension for a stick-swinging incident against Ulf Samuelsson, Kontos got the call. This time, he managed to continue his hot play with the big club. 2 weeks into his call-up, while playing with Jimmy Carson on his wing, he enjoyed a 5-assist, 6-point night against the Blackhawks. Kontos finished his Hollywood assignment with 10 assists and 12 points in 6 games. He's still the fastest King to 10 assists. It took Gretzky 7 games to get there. When the playoffs started, he was no longer a healthy scratch. He even chipped in with a goal in a 4-game loss. Perhaps he had arrived. 2 months before the Gretzky trade, Kontos was released by the Kings, along with several other players who weren't considered regulars. Now, I haven't been able to confirm this, but my personal speculation is that these releases and buyouts of players were used to scrape together a portion of the $15 million that was sent to Edmonton in the trade. But again, that's pure speculation on my part. Anyway, after his release, his agent went hog wild looking for someone willing to acquire his services. He found one, all the way over in Switzerland. And Kontos wasn't alone. The Swiss circuit featured the largest selection of former NHL players outside of North America. Kontos signed on with the Cloton team and finished 8th in league scoring with 33 goals and 55 points in 36 games. Ahead of him on the leaderboard were former NHLers Dale McCourt, Don Lawrence, and Norm DuPont. When the Swiss League season expired, Kontos moved back to Wabashin. There was still a brief window to sign a contract and get into an NHL roster before the deadline. Kontos and his wife hadn't even unpacked their bags yet. Kontos' agent called the Kings on a Hail Mary. Kings GM Rogi Vachon took a flyer on him, figuring he would add a little scoring depth to a team looking to go on a deep run. On deadline day 1989, the Kings tried calling him, but his phone wasn't hooked up yet. It was the first night in the new Kontos household. The Kings tried calling his parents' restaurant, but there was no answer. Like a message in a bottle, the Kings blindly faxed a standard NHL contract to the Busy Bee laundromat in nearby Midland, hoping it would find him. Against all odds, somebody from the laundromat got it to Kontos' father. At 11 at night, there was a pounding on Kontos' door. Not the front door, the bedroom door, inside the house. For one terrifying moment, Kontos and his wife thought their new house might be haunted. It was Chris's father. Chris signed the contract and raced to Beaver Lumber, where he'd already lined up a summer job with a friend. There, he was able to fax the contract back to the Kings, who faxed it back to league headquarters about a half hour before the roster freeze kicked in. He was brought in to be a third or fourth liner. Soon, he would be the Kings' secret weapon. On the eve of the playoffs, regular top six winger John Tonelli fell ill with something that looked like pneumonia. Kontos took his spot. He was given a job. He wouldn't have to lead the rush, make end-to-end dashes, or distribute the puck. His job was the hardest of all, to stand in front of the net. Against Edmonton in the first round, that's exactly what he did. Kontos deflected or banged in the rebounds of 8 LA shots against Grant Fuhr and the Oilers. 6 of them came on the power play. The only game he was held scoreless was in a 4-0 Oilers shutout. The Kings took the series in 7 hard-fought games. The Kings scored 25, the Oilers 20. Kontos finished with no assists. He played his role to a T. His net front presence may well have been the difference in the series. The midnight fax scramble turned out to be a stroke of genius. He scored the same way against Mike Vernon and the Calgary Flames in Game 1 of the next round. But when the Kings squandered a third-period lead to lose the game in overtime, Tonelli was eased back into his regular spot, and Kontos was deployed back in the bottom 6. The scoring dried up. A caricature of Kontos by a Calgary cartoonist circulated. The caption read, "King Kontos reads his fan mail." The letter in the picture is addressed to Dear Occupant. Calgary swept the series in convincing fashion. When the dust finally settled, Kontos had a new 2-year deal, but head coach Robbie Ftorek had been let go. His replacement? Tom Webster. "They buried me," Kontos said years later. "Oh, how they buried me." The Kings tried to pull the same stunt the following season, keeping him in New Haven all season long, then calling him up right before the playoffs. This time, it didn't work out. As a completely gratuitous side note, Kontos scored a goal in the first live Canucks game I ever attended, a 6-3 win for the home team. But I digress. He spent the 1991 season with the Kings' new affiliate in Phoenix, playing on a line with Brian Lawton. He picked up 62 points in 69 games there, but this time, there was no late-season call-up. He came in live in the playoffs for Phoenix, though, scoring 9 goals and 21 points in just 11 games before falling to eventual Turner Cup champs Peoria in the semis. The next year he played for the Canadian national team, hoping to help the nation to gold at the Albertville Games. But as he was preparing to board the plane for Albertville, he was pulled aside and told by Dave King that he was one of the final cuts. A groin injury tipped the scales against him. He stayed in Europe, finishing the year playing pro hockey in Italy and picking up 10 goals and 18 points in 7 games, sore groin and all. After he returned home, NHL expansion would create a new opportunity for him. With the Ottawa Senators and Tampa Bay Lightning set to begin play in late 1992, 40 new roster spots would open up. Kontos wanted one of those spots, badly. He had his agent call the Ottawa Senators every day looking for an invitation to camp, but Senators GM Mel Bridgman didn't want him, so he tried the Lightning. Canadian national team assistant Terry Crisp was the head coach in Tampa. Crisp had also coached the Flames back in '89. Trader Phil was putting together the Tampa Bay roster, and he was giving everybody a shot, from a woman goaltender to Gretzky's little brother. So why not a 28-year-old whose claim to fame was one hot playoff series? Kontos knew that this would be his final stand, his one last chance to make a mark. The first official game in the existence of the Tampa Bay Lightning featured celebrity guests, indoor fireworks, lasers, puffs of smoke, stomping feet and chorus lines, thumping music, and standing ovations, even a future Hall of Fame goaltender in the opposition net. And Kontos upstaged all of it. As the pre-game festivities stretched on and on, the crowd hungered for real action. They started chanting, "Hockey, hockey," for the puck to drop. The puck finally dropped at 8:23 in the evening. At 8:34, a draft bust, a minor leaguer, a training camp walk-on who hadn't played an NHL game in 3 years opened the scoring. Ed Belfour was in net for Chicago. He would go on to win the Vezina Trophy that year as the league's top goalie. But Kontos didn't stop scoring. His first scoring play came 15 seconds into a two-man advantage, ending one power play. About a minute later, he scored again, ending the other from the same spot, right corner crease. By the end of the first, the Lightning were up 5-1. In the second, Kontos added two more. When he scored his third of the game, a 5-hole snapshot, his godfather, who was in attendance, threw his hat onto the ice. One of the ushers tried to eject him from the game for littering the ice surface, until Esposito himself stepped in. No, Esposito explained, it's hockey. Kontos' fourth goal came on a between-the-legs deflection with less than a minute to go in the second. The Lightning held on for a 7-3 victory. When the in-rink announcer called the final minute of the third, the home crowd got to their feet and saluted their new team. After 18 games, he had 18 goals. The entire Senators team only had 36 to that point. When the two teams met for the first time, the Lightning had 18 points in the standings, and the Senators 3. Some felt that the difference in fortunes was the presence of Kontos. Kontos credited a self-help book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Before he'd read the book, he had a tendency to get into his own head a little at times, like he had in '83. One bad play would bruise his confidence. When the team cratered around him, he would bend with it. The book taught him how to relax his mind and continue to play with hunger. Off the ice, new hockey fans around Tampa were asking him to sign copies of the book. On the ice, however, word had gotten out about the sneaky scorer on a hot streak. Opponents started focusing their attentions on him, and before long the scoring dried up again. He managed just 9 goals in the last 48 games of the season, and only 4 at even strength, before a devastating knee injury ended his season prematurely. After starting the year with 21 goals in 20 games to briefly outpace Mario Lemieux, his final totals were 27 goals and 51 points in 66 games. That offseason, Kontos wanted to exercise his option of shopping for a better offer than the 3-year deal he'd signed in Tampa. The NHL didn't recognize the option. Esposito was willing to offer a $75,000 to $100,000 raise, but Kontos didn't agree to terms. Citing personal differences with Esposito, he refused to report to camp and asked for a trade. Nothing happened. Kontos didn't budge. He still had the dream of representing Canada at the Olympics and agreed to a mutual termination of his remaining 2 years. But at least this time, after 11 seasons as a professional hockey player, he finally had a rookie card with his name on it. That year, he returned to the Canadian national team and helped them win a silver medal at the Lillehammer Olympics. He never played another game in the NHL. He spent a season in Sweden, then 2 more years in the I, and finally finished in 1998 after a year playing in Germany. Kontos' hockey career was one of the strangest ones there is. Few have experienced such massive spikes in fortune and misfortune. His career was tanked by a grudge and resurrected by a book. Perception and opportunity appeared at various times like tragedy and comedy masks, which is a fitting image to end on for this player voted best Greek athlete of 1993.
On June 20th, 1992, 2 NHL teams announced they had acquired Eric Lindros. The Philadelphia Flyers had struck a deal. The New York Rangers had also struck a deal. Both were telling the truth, and the NHL had no rule that said which one mattered. 1 year earlier, the Quebec Nordiques held the first overall selection in the entry draft. They'd been warned by Lindros that he wouldn't play for them. Nordiques coach Pierre Paget announced the pick. It was Lindros. Lindros smiled as his name was announced. Nordiques fans in the building clapped tensely. Nordiques president Marcel Aubu shook Lindros' hand and gave him a Nordiques sweater. Lindros thanked him for it and graciously draped it over his arm, but he refused to wear it. It wasn't the first time this had happened. 2 years earlier, Lindros had been the first overall selection of the OHL midget draft. He refused to play for the Sioux Greyhounds, so they shipped him off to the Oshawa Generals, whom Lindros led to a Memorial Cup victory. The package Sioux received from Oshawa helped get them to the Memorial Cup tournament the following year. It also must have been satisfying for Sioux that they beat Oshawa to get there. There was also pro-level precedent. 5 years earlier, Mario Lemieux, the last great prospect before Lindros, had done the same thing. Visibly upset, Lemieux refused to don the Pittsburgh Penguins jersey and vowed not to play for them. 7 years later, Lemieux was the reigning Conn Smythe Trophy winner after leading those same Penguins to their first Stanley Cup title. Nordiques brass had reason for optimism. If they managed to keep Lindros, signs were positive. If they were forced to trade him, the potential return promised to reverse their fortunes anyway. Lindros was steadfast. He didn't want to play in a francophone city. Quebec was patient. Lindros had said he would be willing to play in Montreal. Maybe there was a chance to convince him to play for the team that wanted him, knowing they weren't wanted in return. As a small market team, Quebec also understood that Lindros' value extended beyond the ice. Even without immediate contention, he represented a rare commercial lifeline. In August, Lindros accepted an invitation to Team Canada's training camp for the Canada Cup tournament. Those who were there unanimously agreed that Lindros was one of the best players in camp. Negotiations with the Nordiques were non-existent. The Lindros camp insinuated that it would be a waste of his talents to play in a small Canadian market where the tax rate is high and the sponsorship opportunities low. Wayne Gretzky's endorsement opportunities had tripled since moving from Edmonton to LA. The rumor mill worked overtime. Reports indicated that Lindros would be willing to sign and play in Quebec at $3 million per year, but only with a guarantee of unrestricted free agency after 3 years. For context, Wayne Gretzky made $3.3 million a year at the time. It was an untenable request. Still, the hope was real. Many fans in Quebec had already turned on Lindros. During an exhibition match between Team Canada and Team USA in Montreal, Lindros was booed in warm-ups. He was booed when his name was announced. He was booed when he stepped onto the ice for his first shift. Then he delivered a big hit. Then he scored twice and added an assist. By the end of the night, the boos had turned into thunderous cheers. The message was clear. This could work. Quebec had no intention of trading Lindros. Nearly a year passed. Lindros spent most of it playing for Team Canada, winning silver at the Olympics, to go along with his Canada Cup and World Junior gold medals. Further proof that the most coveted player in hockey was the real deal. Over the season, Lindros had been linked to every big money team: New York, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles. Every star player around the league was linked to rumors involving Lindros. Small details took on new significance. When Lindros' agent, Rick Curran, moved his office to Philadelphia, it was read as a sign. Curran's wife was from Philadelphia. Within a month leading up to the 1992 entry draft, it became clear that Lindros and the Nordiques were at an impasse. There would be no contract. Lindros became the biggest name ever known to be available for trade, perhaps the most valuable asset hockey had ever seen, and he hadn't played a single NHL game. Draft day was a busy one for Paget and Obu. Ultimately, it came down to two teams, and both of them had seemingly won the Eric Lindros sweepstakes. Quebec agreed to a deal with the Philadelphia Flyers which would give the Quebec Nordiques a king's ransom in assets: goalie Ron Hextall, defenseman Steve Duchesne, forward Mike Ricci, 2 first-round draft picks, and crucially, $15 million in cash. Flyers GM Russ Farwell believed he had just made the deal of the century and revitalized a proud club that had missed the playoffs each of the past 3 seasons. No paperwork had been signed, and the formal process had not been activated with the league. But in Farwell's understanding, the two sides had come to a verbal agreement. Rangers GM Neil Smith had already presented a concrete trade proposal to Paget. Hours later, when Smith heard the details of the Flyers deal, he upped the ante, offering $20 million, and forwards Tony Amonte, Doug Waite, and Alex Kovalev, defenseman James Patrick, goalie John Van Beesbrook, and picks. What we don't know is who initiated contact, and it's a shame because whoever it was changes the narrative dramatically. NHL lore falls under 2 categories. In one version, Smith breathlessly tracked down Paget before he had a chance to formally submit the trade. This version of events is sometimes circulated among Flyers fans. In the other, Paget ruthlessly used the Flyers' offer to set the market, formally reopening the negotiation process with the Rangers, among others. This version, sometimes told by those critical of the Nordiques, paints Farwell as a naive GM, taken advantage of by a more cagey peer. The record doesn't resolve the discrepancy. Either way, the Rangers deal was too good to pass up. Because the Flyers deal had not yet been formally submitted to league head offices, the Nordiques believed there would be no harm done in taking the better offer. Or so the Nordiques thought. Farwell learned of the Rangers deal almost immediately. From his perspective, nothing about it made sense. Quebec had already agreed to terms. The return had been set. The only thing left was paperwork. Farwell objected at once, insisting the Flyers already had a deal. He argued that a verbal agreement had been reached in good faith and that Quebec had no right to reopen negotiations. The Rangers disagreed. They believed their offer had been accepted just as clearly. Suddenly, the same asset had been sold twice, and neither transaction had been formally submitted to the league. The dispute was kicked upstairs. League President John Ziegler and NHL legal counsel Gil Stein were asked a simple question with no simple answer. Which deal counted? The NHL rulebook did not define when a trade became binding. There was no language governing verbal agreements. There was no mechanism for resolving competing acceptances. The league had no precedent and no authority to simply pick a winner. With no rule to point to and no precedent to rely on, the league did the only thing it could do. Arbitration was invoked. The question would not be which offer was better or which team deserved Eric Lindros more, but which agreement, if either, actually existed in the eyes of the league. Even here, the NHL stumbled. League procedure required each side to appoint its own arbitrator. Those arbitrators were then supposed to agree on a neutral third party to hear the case. Instead, pressed by time and circumstance, the league bypassed its own process. A neutral arbitrator was appointed directly. The urgency of the moment overruled the letter of the rulebook. The man chosen was Larry Bertuzzi, a veteran labor arbitrator trusted to untangle disputes the league itself could not resolve. Bertuzzi was tasked with an unprecedented decision, determining which of two competing trades, both believed to be legitimate, would stand. The league gathered its documents, the arguments were made, and then everyone waited. Lawyers pored over timelines and language. General managers sat with their futures suspended. The second hand on the wall clock hammered compressed time. Entire franchises held their breath. At that exact moment, on a winding country road north of Toronto, Eric Lindros was already gone from it all. He smiled easily. A canoe was tied to the roof of his car. There were no contracts to sign, no arguments left to make. His end of the work had been done. For the first time in nearly a year, his future was no longer being negotiated. It was time to relax.
After the glory years, the Rangers resembled Norma Desmond from Sunset Boulevard, living off the past, convinced the spotlight was still theirs. The decade that followed the '94 Cup run was an ugly scene. Costly trades, expensive free agent signings with no salary cap oversight, coaching catastrophes, draft busts, and a wins-loss bottom line that struggled to stay out of the red. This was the dead puck era, when scoring was low and goalies were drafted high. The Rangers had a porous defense and an aging goaltender who was battling concussion issues. With the 10th pick in 2001, they selected Daniel Blackburn, a star goaltender from the Kootenay Ice. Over 2 WHL seasons, he won 67 of 101 games. Most goalies return to junior after the draft, then work their way through the minors until a roster spot opens. It's extremely rare for a goaltender to make an NHL team out of their first camp. Only a handful of notable exceptions ever did it. The reason for this is pretty simple. There are only a couple goalie spots available per team, and with the farm system the way it is, teams can only support 6 pro goalies. For that reason, a junior-eligible player would best serve the big club by accepting an assignment back to his junior team, unless he was playing demonstrably better than the other goalies in camp. Rangers coach and former goalie Ron Lowe enjoyed Blackburn's raw athletic ability and felt that alone would get the Rangers out of defensive jams. He told Blackburn that he had a job in New York as long as he played well. However, some surmise that the real motivation behind keeping Blackburn in the fold was that Rangers management thought Richter played better when there was an ace behind him. Another thing to keep in mind is, this was Manhattan in September 2001. The World Trade Center attack had only happened days earlier. With the wreckage still smoldering, the city needed hope. The Rangers found their symbol in Blackburn. The on-ice results, however, were nerve-wracking. For his first game, this less than a month after the 9/11 attacks, Lowe decided to start Blackburn against Jaromir Jagr and the Washington Capitals. At the time, Jagr was the 4-time reigning Art Ross Trophy winner. Blackburn was 18 years and 143 days old, making him the 4th youngest goalie to get a start in NHL history to that point. Jagr left the game in the first period after posting 2 assists and wouldn't return, but Blackburn ended up facing 42 shots in the contest and allowed 5 to get by him, including 4 on the power play. It wouldn't be the last time he faced a barrage that season. In his first 12 starts, he faced fewer than 25 shots only twice, and was peppered by more than 35 on 5 separate occasions, including one back-to-back stretch where the Rangers allowed 97 shots to get through to him. By New Year's, Blackburn sported a reasonable 6-6 record with a very respectable .914 save percentage amidst the onslaught. The Rangers' defense was ranked among the worst in the league at that time, but the raw athleticism his coaches had raved about showed through, and kept him on the Rangers roster.
As the season entered its second half, the Rangers found themselves in the throes of a playoff race. Blackburn got less and less crease time and was eventually assigned to Hartford in the AHL. As a junior-eligible player, he wasn't able to stay in Hartford for more than 2 weeks, but in that time he made 4 starts. It was the most action he'd seen since he'd been the workhorse in Kootenay. In late March, Richter suffered a concussion, a fractured temporal bone, and a lacerated ear when a shot from in tight by Chris Tamer of the Atlanta Thrashers struck his head. Initially, the team wasn't sure of the extent of the damage to Richter, and Blackburn was leaned on heavily. They needed the teenager to hold the fort, which he struggled to do. He lost each of the next 3 games to bring his personal losing streak to 5. With the Rangers still pushing for a playoff spot, the pressure began to mount. But once it was discovered that Richter would miss the remainder of the season, Blackburn settled in and won his next 5 starts. Ultimately, the Rangers failed in their playoff bid, but Blackburn had proven that he belonged. In 31 games that season, he won 12 and made the NHL's all-rookie team, though his underlying numbers had fallen since he had no longer been getting the benefit of sheltered starts. His save percentage fell to .898, and his goals against average had bloated to .332, an astronomical number in the dead puck era. However, all who watched him play understood that the talent was there, and were willing to forgive a teenager for posting shaky numbers behind a poor defensive team in a desperate situation while playing in North America's largest sports market. When the next season started, Blackburn had secured the backup role, but Richter started 12 of the first 15 games. In that 15th game, in early November, Oilers forward Todd Marchant collided with Richter, concussing him. Richter was 36 years old, with a concussion history and coming off back-to-back off-season knee surgeries. By mid-December, it became clear to those around the organization that Richter's career was over. The net was, temporarily, Blackburn's. In his first start after the Richter injury, Blackburn pitched a shutout. And not just any shutout. It was the kind that every goalie dreams about as a kid. A scoreless tie won in overtime. At 19, Blackburn became the everyday starter and responded well at first, winning 5 of 9 starts with a .918 save percentage. Rookie head coach Bryan Trottier rode him, starting Blackburn in nearly every game. The strain showed. His results slipped, and over the next stretch he won only twice while his save percentage dropped to .863. When Rangers GM Glenn Sather acquired goalie Mike Dunham from the Nashville Predators, he arrived as the new number 1. Blackburn surrendered the starter's net and played only 10 more times. When it was all said and done, Blackburn had stuck around all year. At 20, he was a game-hardened veteran. He had proven to be a reliable backup and, when used sparingly, showed flashes of elite ability. With Richter out of the picture, and a little personal push, it was reasonable to think that Blackburn could wrestle the starter's job away from Dunham. That off-season, a non-contact, non-hockey-related nerve injury took away his glove hand. It happened before training camp, during weight training, and originated in his shoulder. The injury left him unable to close his glove hand, making conventional goaltending impossible. Initially, Blackburn tried to return to the ice and play through the injury. During a practice session, a diving save aggravated the damage. He was shut down again with no timetable for a return. It was an unusual affliction, to say the least. A torn muscle could be repaired, strengthened, and rehabbed. The injury to Blackburn's shoulder disrupted the signals controlling his glove hand, and the muscles used for reactionary saves began to atrophy. That April, Blackburn underwent exploratory surgery. The procedure was successful, but the nerve healed slowly. When he took to the ice, Blackburn found that he could no longer make the rotary movement necessary to make a glove save. Then, after brainstorming with Rangers staff, Sather, perhaps inspired by the duo glove hands of Bill Durnan, came up with the idea to play with 2 blockers. Blackburn agreed to try it. No one was sure it would work, but they would treat it as an experiment. Rangers equipment staff modified a left-handed blocker, sewing netting to its underside. The league approved the design, and the experiment was greenlit. Because of visa issues, Blackburn couldn't join the Rangers' ECHL affiliate in Charlotte. Instead, he signed with the Victoria Salmon Kings. The team was already deep in the standings. Results were secondary. The only question was whether a goalie could compete at a high level without a catching glove. Blackburn had to essentially relearn the position with no precedent to draw from. By the end of the campaign, results were inconclusive, but encouraging enough to continue at Rangers camp the following September. With the lockout over, the league returned with a renewed emphasis on speed and skill. For Blackburn, it was the last opening. Another pressure point emerged at camp. Blackburn was eligible for a $6 million insurance payout that would be voided if he continued playing. The choice was stark. Keep going without any guarantee his reinvented game would survive in a faster NHL, or retire due to injury and take the certainty. For a time, Blackburn appeared willing to gamble on himself, but a knee injury at training camp added one complication too many. At 22, he retired from active duty. That season, a new goaltending prospect emerged in Manhattan, one who seemingly came from nowhere, but poised and ready to take advantage of the void left by Blackburn's absence within the organization. It's impossible to know how Henrik Lundqvist's story unfolds had Blackburn avoided a simple weightlifting mishap. By all accounts, Blackburn never carried bitterness over how his career ended. He remained grateful that hockey had provided a good life for him and his family, and he stuck by it for a time, coaching and developing young goaltenders. In 2012, he returned to Madison Square Garden in an alumni game, briefly stepping back into the crease. His career wasn't defined by what he lost, but by how far he was willing to go to keep playing, even when the position itself had to be reinvented.
The Rangers had the highest payroll in the league. They were loaded with future Hall of Famers, but they couldn't get off the ground. They needed a coach to make it work, someone who could command respect. On June 6, 2002, they hired seven-time Cup champ Bryan Trottier. After 54 games, he was fired. Here's how it unfolded. Bryan Trottier was a legend as a player, often voted a top 50 player all time. He was a six-time Cup champion with the Islanders and Penguins, one-time league MVP, a scoring champion, and perennial all-star. He retired sixth on the all-time scoring list. He was considered one of the smartest, most complete centers in the game in his heyday. Beneath the surface, he had always fostered a contemplative approach to matters of identity. For a long time, he kept quiet about his indigenous heritage. Trottier wore the number 19 with the Islanders as a tribute to Paul Henderson and his winning goal at the 1972 Summit Series for Team Canada. During the 1984 Canada Cup, he suited up for Team USA to give something back to the nation that had given him a home and a cherished wife. After his playing career, Trottier got involved in coaching. Trottier became an assistant coach for 4 seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins under Eddie Johnston. There, Trottier focused on video analysis and one-on-one player development. He enjoyed the role of teaching skills on a one-on-one basis, away from the media, and became an important secondary voice on the bench. For Trottier, coaching was all about communicating with the players. For one uneventful year, he took the head coaching position of the Washington Capitals' AHL affiliate Portland Pirates. Then he was back behind the NHL bench with the Colorado Avalanche, where he was an assistant for 4 years. During his time behind the bench with the Penguins and Avalanche, Trottier developed a reputation of being a guru of sorts to young players. Alex Tanguay, Chris Drury, and Milan Hajduk all benefited from his presence and became important pieces in the Avalanche's 2001 Cup run. After the Cup win, Trottier's name was increasingly floated as a potential head coaching candidate in the NHL. Early on, he was linked to the head coaching vacancy with the Capitals, but the Avalanche played deep into the 2002 season, not being eliminated until May. After the Avalanche were eliminated, GM Pierre Lacroix allowed teams to interview Trottier for head coaching positions. Not only that, Lacroix highly recommended Trottier to potential suitors. Rangers GM Glenn Sather fired Ron Lowe immediately after the season was finished. The Rangers had the league's highest payroll at $70 million. To put that into perspective, when the NHL instituted the first salary cap 3 years later, no team was allowed to spend more than $39 million on players' salaries. Going into the 2002 training camp, the Rangers boasted a lineup with such legends as Mark Messier, Eric Lindros, Pavel Bure, and Brian Leetch, as well as Mike Richter, Bobby Holik, Peter Nedved, Matthew Barnaby, and Darius Kasparaitis. But they had missed the playoffs in each of their past 5 seasons and looked lost or disinterested many nights. What they needed was an attitude adjustment. Some outside the organization had little faith in the aging roster, but many commentators thought the addition of Holik would turn the team into a postseason lock. They just needed the right coach to steer the ship. There were many top-notch coaches available that offseason, including Ken Hitchcock, Dave Tippett, and Herb Brooks, all of whom interviewed for the Rangers job, but none had the mystique of Bryan Trottier. Glenn Sather gave all the Rangers head coaching job applicants an 80-page questionnaire. Trottier was the only one who returned his with thoughtful, handwritten answers. Not only that, but there wasn't enough space on the page to contain Trottier's analysis. He stapled 40 extra pages to the questionnaire before submitting it. That alone put him a cut above the other candidates. But Trottier had always been a very thoughtful and competitive individual. Sather was impressed. The questionnaire response proved his seriousness and enthusiasm to land the job. He just wanted it more than the next guy. In early June, Sather named Trottier the 30th head coach in Rangers history. Trottier didn't want to come in with expectations, and he didn't want to be a one-man dictatorship. He brought in a pair of trusted veteran NHL players and head coaches as his assistants. Jim Schoenfeld and Terry O'Reilly had over 2,000 NHL games experience both playing and coaching. For a team like the Rangers, who had so many all-star veterans in the lineup, Trottier came with respect and credibility. Messier was only 3 years younger than the coach and had many battles against him. Though he was a rookie head coach, Trottier was trusted in the room. Day 1 of training camp opened with a speech. Trottier set the tone by reminding all 58 players assembled that nobody's spot on the team was assured. He then pushed them as hard as he could physically, emphasizing the urgency for fitness. With a high-tempo practice, physical training segment, and a full scrimmage, it was as hard a first day of camp as he could throw at them. Afterwards, Trottier was visibly excited while talking to the media, addressing them with a smiling, nervous energy. Trottier kept his foot on the gas for the remainder of camp, establishing an atmosphere of high-tempo energy and attention to detail. By the conclusion of camp, questions began to percolate among the New York media about some of Trottier's decisions. The Rangers had too many good centers, and so naturally had to move one or more to the wing to cover organizational weakness on the wings and maximize roster efficiency. Trottier refused to do it, saying he wanted to see them in their natural position. Some roster cuts were also criticized as favoring higher-profile players over those who performed better. The regular season started against the previous year's Stanley Cup finalists, the Carolina Hurricanes. The Rangers won the game handily. When it was over, Sather came into the locker room and presented Trottier with the game puck. Afterwards, Trottier said he felt whacked out behind the bench. Any euphoric feelings didn't last long. In the club's home opener against Montreal, Trottier was greeted with a shower of boos when he was introduced before the game. The Rangers were booed off the ice after the second period. As was standard with the Rangers of that era, the team struggled to find consistency and continued to struggle on defense.
Trottier implemented a neutral zone trap system, which was standard issue in the NHL at the time. Still, the move was unpopular with both fans and the local media. Trottier had some harsh critics in the local media, none more vocal than Larry Brooks. To get a sense of the tone, Brooks attacked Trottier for not using Pavel Bure on the penalty kill. Deployment was a popular target for criticism of the new head coach. Trottier attempted to implement consistency and effort throughout the lineup by rolling 4 lines. Many were vocal about Trottier's seeming refusal to match lines. However, as arguably the Islanders' best player and heart and soul during their dynasty, he was never going to be welcomed by Rangers fans. The hatred of the fan base was real. To this day, the Rangers crowd chants "Potvin sucks" when the Islanders visit. By early November, the Rangers had limped out of the gate to a 4-8-2 record. Some in the media were already describing Trottier as beleaguered. Trottier called out his veterans in the media, singling out Bure and Lindros for their effort. Then his attention moved down the lineup. He told reporters that Radek Dvorak was playing scared, and that if he was playing against him, he'd challenge him to a fight. The Rangers suffered a 6-3 blowout loss to the lowly Columbus Blue Jackets in early November. Trottier sent out a line of goons in the dying seconds, sparking a brawl. Christophe Oliwa was suspended, and Sandy McCarthy was fined in the aftermath. Trottier was suspended for 2 games for doing it. The Rangers adjusted with an 8-4-3 stretch. 2 of those wins came on a western road trip while Trottier was suspended. That was followed up by a 2-8-1 stretch, where both wins came in overtime. By New Year's, the team was 15-20-5. Sather's patience wore thin. The Rangers had lost their starting goalie Mike Richter to a concussion. For a month and a half, Trottier rode 19-year-old backup Dan Blackburn, starting him in 17 of an 18-game stretch. It took a couple weeks to realize that Richter's injury was career-ending. By the time Sather acquired veteran Mike Dunham to spell Blackburn, the young goalie looked burnt. Programmer's note: for more on Blackburn, see our previous video. Bure also went down in early December and stayed out of the lineup until February. Critically, Brian Leetch also went down around the same time and also didn't return until February. Matthew Barnaby also went out after a knee-on-knee collision. In spite of the injuries to critical personnel, Trottier managed to squeeze an 8-4-1 record out of the team in January and put them only 2 games back of 500. Trottier faced his old Avalanche boss Bob Hartley, who had recently been hired by the Atlanta Thrashers. Hartley was 4-1-1 since taking over in Atlanta heading into New York. When Dunham started against Atlanta, it was the 18th start out of 19 games. Trottier kept the pedal to the metal with his starting goalies in the hopes of breaking the elusive playoff barrier. The Thrashers cruised to a 4-1 victory. The Rangers were embarrassed. Lindros and Holik finished a combined -8 on the night. The New York Times referred to the result as a relapse. Those who watched the Rangers closely had seen the pattern before. Offer hope, then relapse, as the Times put it. The warning signs were unmistakable. The Rangers were right back at it the next night in Washington. The game was a debacle. New York failed to convert on a 5-minute power play in the opening minute, then surrendered 5 power play goals of their own. Trottier pulled Dunham after a shaky start, but Blackburn wasn't sharp. Having watched 19 of the previous 20 games from the bench, Washington won 7-2. 2 nights later, the Rangers were overwhelmed again, this time in Atlanta, and the damage went beyond the 5-2 score. Trottier was grilled about what needed to change during the post-game presser. He pointed to accountability. Bobby Holik could not hide his frustration. A 2-time Stanley Cup winner in New Jersey, Holik suggested the team adopt a more defensive, disciplined approach, but admitted roles were unclear. He implied that no one truly knew what was expected of them. It could have been dismissed as frustration after losing 3 games in 4 nights by a combined 16-5 score.
Instead, it exposed deeper tensions. The Rangers were desperate to make the playoffs. They had assembled one of the league's highest-paid rosters to do it. Flashes of promise had come and gone. Pride had been bruised. The next day after practice, Glenn Sather fired Bryan Trottier. Sather reasoned that after the Rangers had gone on a 5-1 stretch, the 3 losses came down to a matter of the disappearance of discipline and accountability. After it was over, Sather said he looked relieved. He said it looked as though the weight of the world had come off Trottier's shoulders. Trottier was unhappy with the decision, but offered that he wasn't the right man for that group. At the time, the Rangers were 21-26-7 on the season. Sather felt there was still time to move up the standings. Sather took over behind the bench, guiding the team to an 11-10-7 record to close the season. They finished 9th in the conference standings, 5 points back of the 8th-place Islanders. The next season, Sather stayed on as Rangers coach until it became clear they were going to miss the postseason. He hired Tom Rennie with 20 games remaining in the year. The Rangers finally returned to the playoffs in 2006. Trottier never took another head coaching position. He took a